The grandfather clock in the attorney's office ticked steadily, each chime echoing softly through the space lined with polished wood. Evelyn Hart sat curled into a leather chair far too large for her slender frame. The scent of aged wood mingled with freshly poured black coffee, creating an atmosphere both refined and alien. She wondered why she felt so adrift, even while sitting in the very center of her own family. Across from her sat her parents Harold and Margaret Hart, faces calm, eyes discreet yet piercing. Beside them, her sister Charlotte looked like the perfect mirror of the family's expectations, hair pulled neatly into a bun, a navy dress tailored to perfection, her composed face revealing nothing. Next to her sat William, her husband, an ambitious young lawyer whose suit was so precisely pressed it carried not a single crease. Evelyn lowered her gaze to her hands. The streaks of paint still clinging to her fingers were evidence that just last night she had been painting in her shabby Brooklyn apartment. They seemed pitifully out of place among the expensive furnishings of this room. Even the air itself seemed to whisper, "You don't belong here." The lawyer, Mr. Reynolds, adjusted his round glasses, his voice gravelly but firm as he began reading the will of her grandfather, Samuel Hart. The room, already quiet, seemed to grow heavier, as though each word dropped like lead. "To my eldest daughter, Charlotte Hart," he read, "I leave $10 million in cash, shares of Hart Holdings, and full ownership of the seaside estate in Newport." Margaret leaned back slightly, her lips curving into a proud smile she couldn't hide. Harold nodded, eyes gleaming with satisfaction. William gave Charlotte's hand a discreet squeeze under the table, a silent gesture of victory. Charlotte did not smile, but Evelyn noticed the subtle curl of her sister's fingers, her familiar tell of suppressed excitement. And Evelyn? She already knew what was coming. Every family dinner since childhood had been a string of unspoken comparisons. Charlotte, the accomplished; Charlotte the strong; Charlotte the pride. Evelyn was the dreamer, the second daughter who painted pictures no one cared about. Her father had once said, "You're too idealistic, Evelyn. The world doesn't need more dreamers." He had said it like a medical diagnosis, not an opinion. So today, she expected nothing more than a few perfunctory words of consolation. But then Mr. Reynolds lifted his gaze and looked straight at her. "To my younger granddaughter, Evelyn Hart," he intoned, "I leave the contents of a sealed envelope, to be opened privately in the presence of the attorney, with no other family members present." The room seemed to stop breathing. The ticking of the clock grew shrill in her ears. Harold frowned. Margaret turned to her husband in confusion. Charlotte shifted slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing her eyes before hardening into contempt. Heat rushed through Evelyn's body as if fire coursed through her veins. An envelope, that was all. A sealed envelope, while her sister received an immense fortune. Shame surged like a wave. She imagined its contents. Perhaps a few lines scrawled, "Stand on your own 2 feet." A cruel reminder that she had always been the outsider. Her father cleared his throat, slicing through the silence. "This is clear," he said firmly. "My father and I agreed long ago that Evelyn must learn to live on her own. I trust that envelope merely reinforces this final lesson." The word struck her chest like another blade. Margaret nodded quickly, hiding her unease behind a forced smile. Charlotte sat tall, face impassive, but her eyes brimmed with quiet triumph. Evelyn clenched her fists so tightly her nails cut into her palms. She wanted to shout, to hurl back at them that they had never truly seen her, but her throat constricted. Silence was all that came, and in that silence she caught Mr. Reynolds's gaze. There was something there, quiet glimmers, if he wanted to say, "Do not judge too quickly." The reading ended with the scrape of chairs and cold footsteps leaving the room. Charlotte passed by, her expensive perfume trailing behind, sweet yet suffocating. "Good luck," she said flatly, her tone hovering between mockery and pity. Evelyn did not respond. The heavy door shut. Only Evelyn and Mr. Reynolds remained. The room was suddenly so still, the pendulum's ticking sounded like a racing heartbeat. Evelyn sat frozen, her grip on the armrest whitening her knuckles. Mr. Reynolds approached and placed an ivory-colored envelope before her, sealed carefully. On its surface was handwriting she knew well. "For Evelyn, this envelope," Reynolds said, his voice low but steady, "was prepared 5 years ago with utmost caution. Samuel wanted you to receive it privately, without interference from anyone." Evelyn's trembling fingers brushed the rough paper. She drew a deep breath. All the years of contempt, the mocking glances, the endless comparisons seemed to linger in the air. Yet beneath it all was an irresistible pull. What had her grandfather left her? In that moment, in a room that had always felt foreign, Evelyn understood her life was about to turn onto a new path, whether for better or worse. No one could yet know. Mr. Reynolds' car rolled slowly through the rain-soaked streets of Manhattan. In the back seat, Evelyn clutched the letter inside her bag, as though if she let go for even a second, it would dissolve like a dream. Streetlights streaked across, the wet glass stretching into blurred ribbons of light. Like accidental brushstrokes across a gray canvas, she said nothing the entire ride. Only one phrase echoed again and again in her mind. Samuel's words, "This is freedom. This is the life I wished for you." Freedom, the word was so unfamiliar, it left her trembling, overwhelmed. The car turned onto a quiet street in Soho. On either side, iconic red brick buildings rose with tall windows, warm golden lights spilling from cafes and small shops. When the car stopped, Mr. Reynolds tilted his head toward her. "We've arrived." Before her stood a 3-story building, not towering like an office block, but distinctive among the row, its broad glass windows and preserved brick facade outlined with classic black iron. Beneath the street lamps, it seemed both solid and inviting, as though it had been waiting for her all along. The heavy wooden door opened with a soft creak, revealing the ground floor. Evelyn stepped inside, and the first thing she felt was space vast and echoing. High ceilings with exposed beams, crisp white walls, polished wood floors reflecting the dim glow of suspended industrial lights. "This will be your gallery," Mr. Reynolds said, his voice steady, assured. "Everything has been prepared, ready to begin." Evelyn walked slowly, her heels striking against the floor with sharp echoes in the emptiness. In her mind, she pictured the scene, paintings lining the walls, sculptures standing on the polished floor, the soft murmur of visitors, sunlight streaming in through the tall glass panes. It was like a film reel playing in slow motion. "People will really come here," she murmured, almost to herself. Samuel believed so, Mr. Reynolds replied with a rare smile. "He once told me, beauty needs a home. Evelyn will build that home." Her lips trembled as she bit back tears. She walked farther, her hand brushing the cool white wall. For the first time in her life, she felt a place that carried no expectations, no comparisons, no echo of her father's voice, calling her a dreamer. This was a space of her own. They climbed the wooden stairs to the second floor. The apartment opened up in warm surprise. A spacious living room with large windows overlooking the street, walnut floors, a classic white stone fireplace tucked into the corner. Soft golden light from hanging lamps cast a gentle glow over everything. The kitchen was modern without being cold marble island. Light wood cabinets, the faint scent of new timber lingering. By the window was a sunlit corner, perfect for an easel. Evelyn paused there, pressing her hand against the glass still damp with rain. Her heartbeat racing. "On the 3rd floor there are 2 bedrooms already finished," Mr. Reynolds explained. Samuel wanted you to have both a home and a workspace. This apartment is in your name. No one can touch it. Evelyn turned to him, confusion clouding her face. Why me? All my life, I was the one overlooked. Mr. Reynolds shook his head gently. Samuel once told me Charlotte is capable enough to follow the family's path. But only you, Evelyn, carry Elise's spirits, your grandmother's. He wanted to give you the chance she never had. At the mention of her grandmother, warmth spread through Evelyn's chest. Elise had always been remembered only as the dutiful wife. She had never known that Elise had been a painter. Suddenly, it was clear the creative pulse inside her. Wasn't the idealistic sickness her father had called it. It was part of a buried family legacy. Evelyn wandered slowly around the apartment, her fingers trailing over details. The carved wooden banister, the iron-framed windows with a patina of age, the frosted glass pendant lights hanging above. Everything felt both foreign and familiar. She stopped in the middle of the living room, drawing in a deep breath. This place, it feels like a dream. Mr. Reynolds inclined his head. A dream 5 years in the making. Evelyn, not chance, a choice. Evelyn closed her eyes, letting the tears fall freely. For years, she had believed she was excess, living on the fringes of a powerful family. But here, in the warmth of a red brick building's apartment, she felt for the first time that she had been chosen. That she had been seen. Outside, the rain tapered off. Across the night sky, a scatter of faint stars glimmered, reflected in the tall window panes. Evelyn stepped closer and whispered softly, to herself and to the grandfather who was gone. "Thank you, Grandpa." Evelyn sat motionless for a long time, her hands resting on the ivory envelope, as if pressing just a little harder might cause everything to vanish into nothingness. Outside the window, the afternoon light had faded, filtering through the heavy drapes in dull gray streaks. The sky seemed to promise a storm about to break over the city. "You may open it now," Mr. Reynolds said gently. His voice carried no urgency, but there was a certainty in it that left Evelyn no escape. She tore the seal, each rip of paper echoing loudly in the still room. Inside was not only a letter, but also a thick stack of documents, neatly bound. Her heart tightened. Evelyn reached for the letter first. The handwriting, shaky but familiar, sprawled across the white page. It was the hand of her grandfather, Samuel, gone from the world only weeks ago. The inked lines seemed to carry his breath, as if he were still whispering in her ear. "My dearest Evelyn, if you are reading this, then I am no longer by your side. Perhaps throughout your life, you have believed yourself forgotten in the heart. Family. I know you have endured many dismissive looks, many indifferent words. But I want you to understand I have always seen you in a way your parents and sister never did." Evelyn's vision blurred. She drew in a breath and forced herself to continue. "Do you remember when you were 12? I bought you your first box of paints. Everyone laughed, saying I was indulging a dreamy child. But I knew you had something they did not. The ability to see the world through eyes that recognize beauty. You are like Elise, my wife, an artist before she set aside her brushes to become a businessman's wife. She lived her whole life in silence, hiding her paintings in the attic. And I swore never again to let an artist's soul in this family be buried." Her heart clenched. She had only ever heard her father speak of Samuel as a man of steel in business, never as someone who once loved a painter. No one had ever told her this story. She turned to the next page. "I want you to know a secret. For the past 20 years, I quietly built a collection of contemporary art, rare works from famous artists and undiscovered talents alike. Today, it is worth more than $25 million. And I leave it all to you. Not to Charlotte, not to your parents, only to you." Evelyn's breath caught, her hands trembling. "Along with this, I purchased and restored a 3-story building in Soho, New York. The ground floor is a gallery. The second and third floors are an apartment for you. Everything has been placed under your name, with a trust established to operate it. All legal matters are safeguarded by layers of protection no one can break. Evelyn, this is not just property. It is freedom. The freedom I have always wished for you. The freedom to live as your true self. The final lines made Evelyn burst into tears. Never in her life had anyone told her she deserved freedom. The letter ended with a single line. Stronger than any fortune, you are my legacy, Evelyn. Not for wealth, but because you see the world as it could be, not merely as it is. Never stop. She set the letter down, tears smearing the ink. Inside her, a storm raged ongoing at years of dismissal, pain at never being acknowledged, but above all, an unfamiliar joy. Her grandfather had seen her. He had believed in her when the rest of the world had turned away. Mr. Reynolds waited patiently as she gathered herself. At last, he pushed the documents toward her. Mr. Samuel prepared everything. Inventory of artworks, insurance, building deeds, layout of the gallery and apartment. All is ready for you. Evelyn's hands shook as she flipped through the pages. The list revealed works by Richter, Basquiat, and many names she had only admired from afar. Then her eyes caught a small entry in the margin. Section, Evelyn. 10 paintings. What is this? She asked, her voice rough. Mr. Reynolds allowed himself a rare smile. They are the paintings you once sold to anonymous buyers. In truth, Samuel bought them back. He believed your work would be the soul of this collection. Evelyn gasped, covering her mouth with both hands. The paintings she had thought lost forever, hanging in strangers' apartments, had been in her grandfather's care all along. Quietly, steadfastly, he had been building her confidence without her ever knowing. Outside, raindrops began to drum against the window pane. The city seemed to wash itself clean, ready for a new beginning. Evelyn accepted the silver key Mr. Reynolds handed her, gleaming like a symbol of another life. Would you like to see it? He asked, his voice warm. Clutching the letter to her chest, Evelyn nodded within her. A door had opened. No longer the dreamy daughter dismissed by her family, she was a new Evelyn Hart. Finally seen, finally trusted, and finally free. The phone rang just as Evelyn was sitting by the window of her new apartment, a steaming cup of tea in her hands. Below, Soho sparkled with lights after the rain, streams of people moving through the lively street. Her heart was still trembling. From what she had seen, a vast gallery space, a warm apartment, a new doorway to her life. But the shrill sound of the phone snapped her back to reality. On the screen appeared a single name, Charlotte. Evelyn hesitated for a moment before answering. You really think he meant to leave that to you? Her sister's voice came through, cold enough to chill the room. The whole family believes. He was losing his mind. Evelyn gripped her cup, fingers burning. He was perfectly lucid when he wrote the will, Charlotte. All the paperwork was carefully prepared. I have nothing to dispute. On the other end, Charlotte gave a short, dry laugh. You're so naive, Evelyn. Father is preparing to sue. You think you'll keep it that easily? Just wait. The call ended abruptly, leaving only the hollow buzz in Evelyn's ear. 2 weeks later, the official summons arrived. Harold Hart. Her father was listed as plaintiff, accusing Samuel of being mentally compromised and misled when drafting the portion of the will concerning Evelyn. On the first day in court, Evelyn sat beside Mr. Reynolds at the defense table. Across from her, her father sat upright in a charcoal suit, face expressionless, while her mother avoided her gaze. Charlotte sat beside them, her sleek brown hair in a high bun, her eyes glittering with pride. Throughout the session, their lawyer repeated the same refrain. Mr. Samuel was old and easily manipulated. They sneered at Evelyn, labeling her a failed artist clinging to an inheritance. Each word pierced like a needle. Evelyn wanted to fight back, to scream, but Mr. Reynolds's hand resting firmly over hers reminded her. Wait. Then Reynolds rose and presented the evidence: video recordings of Samuel discussing the collection, audio files of his confirmations, a mental health certificate signed by his doctor, even footage of him personally signing each document. Every detail was meticulous, undeniable. The courtroom shifted. Skeptical and dismissive looks gave way to silence, even surprise. Harold's patience frayed, his fists clenching tightly. Charlotte glanced at him, and for the first time, Evelyn saw a flicker of worry in her sister's eyes. The session adjourned. But the outcome was almost certain. There was no way to overturn Samuel's wishes. That night, Evelyn returned to her Soho apartment. She sat before the fireplace, watching flames dance. What she felt was not victory, but a strange emptiness. She replayed the faces from that day: her father's cold stare, her mother's silence, Charlotte's mixture of scorn and unease. She had grown used to being dismissed, but never had the distance between them felt so vast. She whispered to the fire, "Grandpa, if you were still here, would you think I'm strong enough?" Only the crackle of burning wood answered her. The storm didn't end there. Soon, the media caught wind of the lawsuit. Business papers ran headlines like "The Unexpected Heir," "Youngest Daughter," "A Failed Artist Claims Multi-Million Art Legacy." Online comments split, some mocking, others curious. Evelyn chose silence. She poured herself into clearing the gallery space, sorting through the files Reynolds had given her, and studying each piece of the collection. Every painting, every sculpture felt like her grandfather's whisper, "Keep going." One evening, reviewing the artist's list, Evelyn froze at the entry. Section Evelyn 10 Paintings. Her breath caught. Those were the works she had once sold off cheaply to anonymous buyers, just to pay rent. They had all been her grandfather's doing. Tears spilled, not from pain this time, but from trust. He had believed in her long before she had believed in herself, steadfast, silent, unwavering. 3 months later, the final ruling came. Samuel's will was upheld as entirely valid, no further appeals permitted. The art collection, the gallery, and the apartment were officially hers. When Evelyn received the notice, she stood alone in the pristine white gallery space. Outside, the season's first snow dusted the windows with a delicate veil. She placed her hand against the cold wall, inhaling deeply. "You've lost, Father," she whispered, not in mockery, but as a statement to herself for the first time. In her life, Evelyn felt a strange, unshakable steadiness. Her family could turn their backs. The media could scorn her. But she was here inside the space her grandfather had built for hers, living proof. She was no one's shadow anymore. During the snowy days that blanketed Soho, Evelyn all but lived inside the gallery. Each morning, she would heave open the heavy iron door, letting the cold winter light spill in. Then spend hours staring at piles of paperwork and plans, not knowing where to begin. Everything around her was still raw, stark white walls, bare wooden floors, a few wooden crates holding paintings scattered across the space. Evelyn pried open each crate, gazing at the works her grandfather had left her. Some were dazzling abstracts, others portraits so haunting they made her shiver. Each piece radiated a power she had never imagined she would touch. But the more she looked, the heavier her worries grew. How could someone who knew nothing about managing art possibly run a gallery of this scale? Evelyn had been nothing more than a part-time painter, living off tutoring jobs and cafe shifts. Concepts like artwork, insurance, consignment contracts, and exhibition strategy all sounded like a foreign language. One late afternoon, while she was hunched over her old laptop, the doorbell rang. Evelyn sighed, expecting another reporter. But when she opened the door, there stood a woman in her 60s, slender silver hair pinned into a low bun, wrapped in a beige wool coat with worn leather gloves. Her eyes were sharp yet warm, carrying the gravity of experience. "You're Evelyn Hart?" the woman asked, her voice low and husky. "Yes, I'm Evelyn. And you are?" The woman smiled and handed over a card. "Marian Foster, Honorary Director, Foster Gallery, Boston," Evelyn stammered. "I've heard of you. The Foster Gallery is one of the most respected institutions." Marian gave a slight nod. "Samuel and I were longtime friends. Before he passed, he asked me to help you." Evelyn froze. He planned even this. "Samuel never did anything halfway," Marian replied, her eyes steady, piercing. "He believed. You had the eye for art, but he also knew you needed a guiding hand." Evelyn stood in silence, her emotions tumbling over one another. In her life, no one had ever trusted her in such a deliberate way. Her grandfather hadn't just left her an inheritance, he had left her a teacher. "I'm not here to impose," Marian continued, her voice calm and deliberate. "I'll walk beside you, point out what must be learned. The rest will always be your choice." In the weeks that followed, Evelyn's life transformed. Mornings were spent opening crates with Marian. She taught Evelyn how to check certificates, record insurance details, and handle damages to a piece. She recounted stories from the art world, tense negotiations, careless mistakes that sank galleries, and the exhilarating moments when a young artist was discovered. "Remember this," Marian emphasized, "art isn't only about beauty. It's contracts, shipping, conservation, and, above all, trust between artist and gallery. Lose that trust, and you lose everything." Evelyn carefully recorded every word. At night, she lay on the wooden floor of her apartment, rereading her notes until her eyes ached, torn between fear and excitement. One day, Marian took her to a massive storage facility on the outskirts of the city. The air inside was frigid, the vast space filled with carefully preserved artworks under soft light. Evelyn's breath caught at the sight. But then her eyes landed on a section labeled Section Evelyn. "What is this?" she asked, heart racing. Marian pulled a canvas from the rack, still wrapped in cloth. When she peeled it back, Evelyn gasped. It was the first painting she had ever sold, a landscape in shades of fresh green. Next to it hung another, a portrait of a girl with striking golden eyes. Then another, and another, all of them hers. "No, this can't be," Evelyn whispered, trembling as her hand reached out. "These, my grandfather bought them all." Marian nodded. "He wanted you to know your worth was never forgotten." He called this the heart of the collection. Hot tears slid down Evelyn's cheeks, cutting through the cold air. Never had she imagined her paintings treated with such reverence, not shoved aside, not dismissed as childish doodles. And yet, Marian's presence didn't silence the storm outside. The press continued, circling the story of the youngest daughter who unexpectedly inherited an art empire. Some columnists sneered, calling Evelyn nothing more than a lucky accident. Her father, Harold, doubled down in interviews, spitting venom. "She knows nothing about business." Samuel made a mistake. Each time Evelyn read those words, her resolve wavered. But Marian always appeared at the right moment, setting a steaming cup of tea before her and saying, "Let them talk. Your task isn't to prove yourself with words, but with what you build here." Evelyn would nod, drawing in deep breaths. She knew the road ahead would not be easy. But for the first time in her life, she had a companion, a mentor, someone who truly believed she could. One late night, after they had hung a few trial pieces, Marian stood in the center of the gallery, looking around with a small smile. "Do you see it, Evelyn? This place is breathing. Give it time, and it will come alive. And when it does, no one will call you a dreamer anymore. They will call you the one who dared to make dreams real." Following her gaze, Evelyn looked at the once blank walls, now glowing with color. She realized then her fear was slowly giving way to something else, faith. Winter dragged on slowly, leaving Soho mornings veiled in white mist. Evelyn often descended the wooden stairs, flipped on the warm yellow lights, and found herself standing alone in the vast gallery. The white walls still bore wide, empty stretches, with only a few pieces hung under Marian's guidance. The only sound was the echo of her own heels against the wooden floor, even with Marian by her side as a teacher. Most of Evelyn's hours were spent facing silence. She had no parents to confide in, no close friends in the art world. Many nights, after closing up, she sat on a wooden chair in the center of the wide hall, feeling as though the emptiness would swallow her whole. Yet within that loneliness, something else began to grow. Evelyn started learning to listen to the beat of her own heart rather than fleeing from it. One snowy evening, she opened a crate of paintings she hadn't yet explored. Pulling away the cloth cover, she froze. Inside lay an oil painting of a woman standing before a window, light streaming across her paint-stained hands. In the corner, faintly signed, E. Hart. It was a painting she had created at 20. Just after leaving home, living in a cramped, shabby room. She remembered that night vividly. The flickering bulb, her stomach growling with hunger, yet she painted for hours, terrified that if she stopped, her dream would extinguish. That painting she had sold for a few $100s to pay rent. She never imagined her grandfather had bought it back. Preserving it all these years, Evelyn sank to the floor, staring at it for a long time. A profound emotion welled within her, even when she had believed herself utterly alone. Someone had always been watching, quietly believing. "I was never truly alone," she whispered, her voice breaking. But faith wasn't always enough to cover the gaps. When newspapers mocked her as lucky by accident, Evelyn's heart grew heavy. Each headline echoed her father's voice. "You're not practical. You only know how to dream." One late night, after shutting her laptop, she stepped out onto the small rooftop terrace behind the building. The air bit cold against her skin. Streetlights glowed faint in the distance. Evelyn pulled her scarf tight, lifted her gaze to the dark sky, her heart both hollow and aching. "Grandpa, I'm scared," she whispered into the night. "What if this path fails? What if they're right?" No reply came. Only the whistle of wind through the iron rails. But in that silence, Evelyn realized something vital. She had to keep going, even afraid. Marian noticed the weariness in her eyes. One morning, she placed 2 steaming coffees on the table and asked bluntly, "You think you don't have the strength, do you?" Evelyn bit her lip. "I've never been recognized. And now there's this entire gallery dropped into my hands. It feels like a weight too heavy." Marian studied her for a long moment. "Listen, Evelyn. Loneliness is inevitable when you walk a path few dare to take. But strength is born from that very emptiness. Samuel didn't choose you to carry a burden. He chose you to be free. There's a vast difference." The words planted a seed inside Evelyn. That evening, for the first time in days, she sat at her easel in the apartment, opened her paints, and began to work. Not for display, not to prove herself, but simply to live honestly. Her brushstrokes burst forth bold, unrestrained, utterly. Unlike her past hesitance. When she finished, she stared at the canvas, a swirl of red and blue, storm-like, chaotic, yet beautiful. Evelyn smiled through tears. In the weeks that followed, she focused on preparing for the gallery's opening. Each morning, she wrote task lists, choosing a theme, planning, lighting, drafting guest lists. She still felt lost, but instead of panicking, she learned to break each challenge into steps at times. Silence would return, heavy as a thick blanket pressing on her shoulders. Yet now, within that silence, Evelyn found an ally, the memory of her grandfather and her own paintings. They were like small flames, keeping her moving when darkness tried to consume her. One afternoon, as she sat alone in the gallery, Evelyn gazed through the tall glass windows. Outside, people hurried past, busy with their lives. She stood there, in a space still nearly empty. And suddenly, she felt a strange calm. Yes, she thought, I am lonely. But here, I am also free. That night, Evelyn wrote in her journal, perhaps, loneliness isn't an enemy, but the space where I see myself most clearly. I have waited all my life to breathe in this emptiness, and I will not let it pass in vain. When she set her pen down, her hand no longer trembled. That afternoon, the sky turned a heavy gray, rain slanting against the gallery windows. Evelyn had just finished working with Marion, measuring the light for the newly installed fixtures, noting where certain pieces would hang. After Marion left, she stayed behind alone, sitting on a wooden chair. Listening to the patter of rain, the sudden chime of the doorbell startled her. She assumed it was just a delivery or a repairman. But when she pulled open the heavy wooden door, the sight froze her in place. Charlotte. Her sister stood there in a soaked beige trench coat, wet hair clinging to her cheeks, expensive heels, spattered with mud. Though she still carried an air of elegance, there was something weary about her face, an undercurrent of being lost. Charlotte, Evelyn stammered, her heart pounding. What are you doing here? Charlotte stepped inside. Without waiting for an invitation, her wet heels leaving marks on the wooden floor. She stood in the middle of the nearly empty space, glancing around with eyes that flickered between curiosity and caution. You're really doing it? She said flatly, her tone somewhere between surprise and mockery. A gallery here? Evelyn closed the door, steadying herself. Grandpa left it to me. I couldn't abandon it. Charlotte turned, meeting her gaze directly. And do you think that's fair? Your whole life you've just dreamed, painted? Then suddenly he hands you something this enormous. And meet the one who followed every family expectation cast aside. The words cut, sharp as glass. But this time, Evelyn didn't bow her head. You've always had everything you needed, Charlotte. Money, recognition, our parents' pride. This is what I needed to survive. Grandpa knew that. The silence grew thick. The rain outside filled the gaps between them. Charlotte walked slowly around the room, her eyes pausing on an unmounted painting, leaning against the wall, an explosion of green and gold swirling together. Evelyn had titled it Inheritance. This one's yours. Charlotte asked, her voice quieter. Yes, Evelyn said. I painted it right after the trial. I wanted to capture the feeling of receiving something that finally belonged to me. Charlotte stood still for a long time. Her eyes, usually gleaming with pride, softened with rare contemplation. It's beautiful, truly beautiful, she whispered, no sarcasm, no disdain. Just simple acknowledgement. Evelyn's chest tightened. For all these years, she had never once heard that word from Charlotte about any of her work. Thank you. Evelyn murmured. Charlotte turned, her expression gentler. Still, I can't help but feel it was unfair. You were given an empire ready-made. Everything I've achieved, I'd built myself. Evelyn swallowed hard, then met her sister's gaze. Maybe that's true. But you know as well as I do, I was never recognized growing up. I needed a lifeline to keep from giving up. Grandpa gave me that. Not to compete with you, but to save me. Charlotte said nothing. The rain drummed against the glass like a somber score. Finally, she nodded slightly. Maybe I never saw that until now. Another silence fell, but this time it wasn't heavy. It felt like a pause, a breath both could share. Almost without thinking, Evelyn said, my first opening is in a few weeks. The theme is transformation. If you'd like, you could come. Charlotte blinked in surprise. "Kay, come here, to your exhibition. Not for the family, not for money," Evelyn replied firmly. "For me, I want you to see that I truly chose this path." Charlotte lowered her head, as if weighing the thought. When she looked up, her eyes had softened. "I'll think about it." With that, she turned toward the door. Evelyn followed, but didn't stop her. The image of her sister walking into the gray, rain-strong yet lost etched itself deeply into her mind. When the door closed, Evelyn stood alone again in the gallery. But, unlike before, the emptiness didn't consume her. Instead, a faint light flickered within, fragile, yet warm. Perhaps, after all the years of rivalry and comparison, there was still a crack, a small opening where the two sisters might find their way back to each other. That evening, Soho blazed with light. The street, already lined with galleries and cozy cafes, now had a new destination: Aurora Gallery. A gleaming brass sign had just been mounted above the glass entrance, reflecting the glow of the street lamps. Inside, pristine white light flooded the space, spilling outward like an invitation. Behind the wooden doors, Evelyn's hands were ice cold, slick with sweat. She wore a simple black dress, modestly fitted with delicate lace trim knot, a brand new designer piece, but a dress once owned by her grandmother, Elise, tailored to fit. She wanted her grandmother's presence tonight, even if only through a small detail. Marian approached, laying a steady hand on her shoulder. "Breathe, Evelyn. This is your night. Step out as if you've always belonged here." Evelyn nodded, hiding the tremor in her chest. Beyond the doors, voices already swelled: collectors, journalists, art students, and curious neighbors. The air inside buzzed with the scent of fresh paint and the fragrance of white lilies placed in every corner. When the doors opened, Evelyn stepped forward, and for a moment, the room hushed. Not because she was dazzling, but because people were curious. Here stood the youngest Hart daughter, the unexpected heiress who had stirred the press for months. She smiled, inclining her head. Then, step by step, Evelyn guided guests along. Walls filled with works, vivid abstracts, piercing portraits, and cold steel sculptures. The theme transformation was alive in every line and shape, from melting colors to twisted forms. Many lingered before the painting, titled Inheritance. Swirl of green and gold Evelyn had painted in the aftermath of the trial. Murmurs rippled. "Who's the artist? Is it her?" Marian answered with a quiet nod, and glances of surprise mixed with admiration turned toward Evelyn. Her heart pounded wildly, but this time not with fear. With belief, through the crowd, Evelyn caught sight of a familiar figure at the far end: Charlotte. She wore a deep blue dress, standing tall, a sharp contrast to the weariness she had shown on that rainy day. But her eyes no longer shone with triumph. They moved slowly over each painting, not judging, seeking dot. Evelyn froze, stunned, trembling. Then she moved toward her, each heartbeat loud in her ears. "You came," Evelyn whispered, afraid to break. The moment Charlotte turned, her gaze softened. "I wanted to see for myself." They stood together before Inheritance. Charlotte said nothing at first, staring into the canvas. Finally, she exhaled. "It's beautiful. But not just beautiful. It breathes. I never thought art could make someone feel this much." Evelyn's throat tightened. For years, she had longed for her sister's acknowledgement. And now, it arrived in the simplest form yet. It made her want to cry. "Thank you," she said. Softly, her voice unsteady, Charlotte looked directly at her. "I'm still angry. I still think Grandpa was unfair. But I understand this isn't just about money. This is you." Evelyn drew a deep breath, meeting her sister's eyes. "I didn't take anything from you. I only accepted what I needed to keep going. And I hope you can see I'm no longer the helpless dreamer. For a fleeting second, their eyes met not as rivals, not as endless comparisons, but as two women learning to see each other. Charlotte gave a slight nod. Maybe I never really saw you, till tonight. The night unfolded with laughter, clinking, glasses and applause when a well-known critic declared that Aurora Gallery promises to be a new beacon of contemporary art. Evelyn smiled, greeting guests, introducing artists, answering questions from reporters. It was a dream she had never dared to imagine, and yet, amid the noise, what touched her most was the moment she had stood beside her sister before her own painting. As the evening wound down and the crowd thinned, Charlotte approached once more. "You truly built this, and I can't deny it anymore." Evelyn smiled, tears glimmering in her eyes. "I wasn't alone. Grandpa believed in me, and tonight maybe you do too." Charlotte placed her hand on Evelyn's shoulder, brief, but warm enough for Evelyn to feel it. Then she left, her tall figure dissolving into the Soho night. Evelyn returned to the gallery's center, her feet aching, her black dress hugging her slight frame. No more noise, only the scent of fading lilies, fresh paint, and the soft golden lights. She sat on a wooden chair and exhaled, not in weariness, but in release. Tonight, she had stepped out of her family's shadow, standing in a space she had built herself. And for the first time, she no longer needed to be chosen, because she had chosen herself. After the dazzling opening night, Aurora Gallery settled into its true rhythm. The first article appeared in a local arts magazine with the headline, "A New Voice for Contemporary Art in Soho." Critics called the gallery a promising space and a remarkable beginning from a young face. Evelyn read those lines again and again, her heart caught between elation and unease. But the joy didn't last long before an envelope appeared in the gallery's downstairs mailbox. On it, in familiar handwriting, were the words, "Harold Hart." Evelyn's hands shook as she held it, a mix of curiosity and dread. Alone in her apartment, she opened it. Inside was a brief note. "Evelyn, your mother and I have thought a great deal since the opening night. While we don't fully agree with your grandfather Samuel's decision, we cannot deny what you have accomplished. If you're willing, we would like to meet for lunch." Father Evelyn froze in her chair, her heartbeat racing. For years, Margaret had never reached out. Harold had only ever criticized and condemned. Yet now, here they were, writing a letter, asking to meet. She set it on the table, staring at the words. Part of her longed for recognition from her parents. Another part recoiled in fear. Was this a trap? Would they only dismiss her again, try to drag her back into the mold they demanded? When Marian heard, she only raised an eyebrow. "Do you want to go?" Evelyn was quiet for a long while. "Don't know. I'm afraid they'll make me feel small again." "Then remember this," Marian said firmly. "You're no longer the girl belittled at the family table. You're the owner of a gallery, someone who made an entire city take notice. If you go as that person. And you have the right to set boundaries." Evelyn nodded slowly. For the first time, she felt she had a choice, not dragged along, but deciding for herself. On the day of the meeting, she chose a small cafe in West Village, not the lavish restaurants her family favored. When she entered, her parents were already seated. Her father in a tailored suit, his face stern, but his eyes betraying unease. Her mother beside him, twisting a silk scarf nervously, a far cry from her usual composure. "You came, Harold," said, his voice slightly rough. Evelyn sat down opposite them, taking a deep breath. "Yes, I came to listen, but also to be clear." A pause hung in the air. The waiter poured water, then left them. The small room held only the three of them. "We've looked at everything again." Her mother spoke first, her voice low, no longer sharp. "I never imagined you could accomplish this. The gallery, it's beautiful. Evelyn searched her eyes for sarcasm, but found none. Only awkwardness, perhaps sincerity. Her father cleared his throat. I still think Samuel was biased, but I can't deny you've done something noteworthy. The press, the clients. I think maybe you've found your own path. Evelyn bit her lip. Once, those words might have been enough to make her weep. Now, they felt like cold stones beginning to crack, but still hard. I didn't come here to seek your approval. Evelyn said slowly, I came because I want honesty. If you're only here to control me or compare me, I'll walk away right now. Her father flinched. Her mother quickly interjected, No, we just want to try again, at least. We were wrong. To leave you behind all these years. I can't promise to change everything overnight, but I want to try. In that moment, Evelyn looked at the two people who had always made her feel invisible. They still didn't fully understand, still carried their judgments. But for the first time, she saw a door cracked open, fragile, hesitant, but real. She gave a small nod. I'll give you a chance, but I need boundaries. I need to be myself. The meetings that followed weren't always easy. Some meals dissolved into heavy silences. Sometimes Harold slipped, comparing Evelyn to Charlotte, then stumbled to a stop. Once, her mother asked, Do you plan to marry soon? Evelyn could only smile faintly and reply, Mom, I've only just begun a new life. Yet among the awkwardness, light broke through. Once, her mother visited the gallery, lingering before a painting and whispering, Perhaps I've missed this part of you. Another time, her father sent a short email. The Art Quarterly article was impressive. I read it. Evelyn never expected perfect reconciliation. She knew wounds built over decades would not heal in a day. But now, each small step was enough to show she was no longer entirely shut out. One evening, after her parents left at dinner, Evelyn stayed behind. Through the cafe window, New York streets shimmered with lights. She opened her phone, rereading the latest message from her father. Good luck with your next exhibition. It was a simple line, but to Evelyn, it was like a stone cast into water, sending ripples across her heart. She smiled not because she finally had their praise, but because for the first time she felt strong enough to hear it without needing it. 1 year after opening night, Aurora Gallery was no longer a newcomer. The art press now called it a beacon for forgotten voices. 6 exhibitions had been held. 3 young artists had sold their work for the first time to major collectors. In the photographs, Evelyn always appeared in a simple dress, eyes alight, standing beside the artists as a companion rather than a powerful owner. In the mornings, she often walked down Soho streets with a hot coffee in hand, greeting neighboring shopkeepers. Good morning, Ms. Hartnew. Exhibition today. They would call. Evelyn would smile and reply, soon. Simple words, but enough to make her feel she truly belonged to the city, not the outsider in the Hart family anymore. In the storage room, Evelyn dedicated a section to Section Evelyn, the paintings her grandfather had secretly bought. No longer hidden away, she displayed them as part of the gallery's soul. When visiting art students stopped by, she would point and say, This is proof that even when no one believes, one person can change everything. From the trust fund Samuel had left, Evelyn founded the Hart Foundation, a program supporting young artists from overlooked communities. The foundation hosted free workshops for high school students, giving them brushes and paints, giving them a space to create, to believe their dreams were worth something. One afternoon, while teaching a group of teenagers, Evelyn noticed a curly-haired girl standing apart, watching but not daring to pick up a brush. Evelyn approached with a smile. Do you want to try? The girl shook her head. I'm not good. My parents say so. Evelyn gently took her hand, placing a brush in it. My grandfather once told me something. A person's worth is not defined by anyone else. If you want to paint, then you're already good enough to begin. The girl looked up, her eyes brightening. And in her, Evelyn saw a reflection of herself years ago, the trembling girl with her very first paint set. Her parents visited occasionally. Not often, not perfectly, but different from the silence of the past. Once, her mother stood before the painting inheritance for a long time and whispered, "I was wrong not to see you." Her father sometimes sent short emails. Successful exhibition. I read the article. Evelyn no longer craved praise, but each small gesture was like a puzzle piece, forming a new picture of family not perfect, but learning to heal. Charlotte remained a complicated figure in Evelyn's life. They didn't become close overnight. But from that opening night, a thread had formed. Once Charlotte came to a show, stood beside her, and whispered, "You proved it. And I'm proud." Evelyn turned, surprised, but only smiled. They didn't need to embrace in tears. It was enough to stand side by side as two women, no longer winner and loser. One late evening, after locking up the gallery, Evelyn sat in a velvet chair by the entrance. Most of the lights were off, leaving only a warm golden glow over the brass plaque at the door. Aurora Gallery, in honor of Elise and Samuel Hart. She reached out, brushing her fingers over the words. Faces rose in her mind. Elise, her grandmother, with gentle eyes. Samuel, with his quiet smile and the letters he left. And herself, the girl who once cried in a shabby rented room because no one in her family came to her first show. Now, she was the one opening doors for others. "Thank you," she whispered. "I haven't let you down." 3 months later, Art Quarterly published a feature on Aurora Gallery, calling it a space that has redefined fairness in art. The article ended with a quote from Evelyn. "You don't need anyone's permission to shine. You only need one person to believe in you, and, if no one else, let that person be yourself." When she read it, Evelyn smiled. The words weren't only for readers, they were for her. She had endured silence, contempt, the pain of being overlooked. But now she stood in the center of her own world, steady and at peace. Before leaving, she looked around the quiet gallery once more. The painting stood silent, yet seemed to whisper, "We are here because of you." Evelyn stepped out into the New York night, the air cool, the street lamps glowing over wet pavement. She pulled her scarf close, her heart swelling with a rare, profound peace, no longer needing anyone's choice, no longer bound by comparisons. Evelyn Hart had chosen herself, and that was the true legacy. Perhaps what touches our hearts most in this journey is not the inheritance itself, but the way Evelyn found herself again from the overlooked girl to the woman who dared to stand tall and shine. Thank you for listening with Snail Story. If today's story moved you, please leave a comment and don't forget to like and subscribe so we can share more healing and inspiring journeys together each week.